Hello, Watch Voice Focus. The end of the season is almost upon us. There's been a manager change, a points deduction, the VAR out, and now the prospect of a stadium move before we even get to matters on the pitch. Joining me to give us an expert opinion from a neutral point of view is one of the most respected sports journalists in the country, in Henry Winter. Henry, wonderful to have us with you. How are you doing today?
Hi, Matt. Very good. Yeah, thanks for inviting me in.
No, good of you to do it. Good of you to do it. I know you've got a lot going on yourself, which we'll discuss as we get towards the end. But as I touched on there, it's just been a crazy season for Forest. This is a bit of an all-encompassing question, but just to kick us off, what have you made of it from a neutral point of view, as I say?
Good bits, bad bits, picking the wrong fights, I was sad when Cooper left. I can understand because I don't live too far away. I live in Rutland and my local pub's got Nottingham Forest fans in it. And I understood the sort of frustration with Cooper towards the end. I'd always supported him because I'd known him for a long time. I actually sat in on one of his sessions when he was under 17 coach and saw how he interacted with the players, obviously younger players, but tactically and game management and all that. I've just, that was frustrating. But Nuno, I've known Nuno obviously since Wolves. He taught me how to kill a boa constrictor once, which is not necessarily the most useful skill in Rutland. Yeah, just in case you need that, it's one so slightly far down the CV. But yeah, I mean, just a fantastic guy, very empathetic, people skills, quite emotional, but intelligent, experienced. I think you look a little bit better organized. I like the slightly more. I mean, you see them week in, week out, but there seems to be more of a sort of cutting edge. Hudson-Odoi's delivering, although it always makes me laugh because just as a layman watching, what Hudson-Odoi is going to do. He's not going to go outside his fullback. He's going to cut in, but he does it so effectively. Gibbs White, I think, is probably your most consistent player over the last couple of years. I thought getting the goalkeeper in, Sels, just looked a good decision. Just looking at you last season, even though I was a Henderson fan, I just thought there was a little bit sort of uncertainty in goal. And Bowley players like that playing well, but it just seems. Look, I've met your owner. I've been invited into his sort of inner lair at the ground, and he's a fascinating, more nuanced individual than depicted. But I think sometimes it's better to take a step back rather than to go flying in, flailing fists as he did. And I think all sympathy for Forest and for Marinakis was over those VAR decisions, because look, every club has poor VAR decisions, and they were particularly poor in that game. But I think its sympathy was just lost by that tweet. And you've got a really good media side. I mean, Wendy is incredibly experienced, and she's worked at Newcastle under Mike Ashley. She's worked at the FA. And sometimes I think it's just, I mean, I hope that she was listened to, and I am, she's a very experienced. So, sometimes it's best not to pick fights, or just to let the fans' frustration with PGMO, with refereeing, just turn up the volume on that, rather than having officials within the club. The Clattenburg thing, I don't have a problem per se with a referee coming in and advising, Arsenal have got a set piece, coach. Why shouldn't you have someone who actually comes in and gives almost like a scouting report on the referee? But to put Clattenburg up, which is Mark's nature, I mean, he's a very sort of chatty individual. I've known him for a while. I just don't think that helps. So, yeah, it's been a bit hit and miss. But look, the most important thing, I know there's so many debates going around Forest at the moment about the stadium, about the owner, about the sort of slight siege mentality because of PGMO. But you stayed up, and you should absolutely celebrate that. So don't ignore that. And everyone says, oh, well, because it's, the three teams came up and they were poor and then they went back down again. You still stayed up. You're still in the Premier League. You're still on the gravy train.
Do you think a lot of what you've heard, so I will pick up on a few of the player names you referenced there. Do you think it's so chaotic that it's a barrier to success, or does the siege mentality help?
It's chaotic in individual moments, whereas the sort of broader point I'm trying to make is that, you've stayed up. You've got, I mean, I'm fortunate because I travel around and go to all the grounds. You've got a fantastic atmosphere there. That's why I was slightly disconcerted to read Danny's piece about the possibility of moving. It's very special what you've got there. And just sometimes, because of, as you say, the chaos, we micromanage, we micro-report everything in this game, whether that's a post-COVID thing, whether it's the world that we are in. Sometimes it's important to actually take a step back and look at what Forest have got going. If you're in the heart of a great city, you're probably in the sporting. I can't think of many areas. When I go and I sort of park in the cricket ground next to, is it the Larwood and Vose pub? When I go and park there, I just look out at Trent Bridge. I'm a member of Notts Rockets, and I can't think of anywhere that's actually such a sort of sporting hub in the world. You could argue Dundee with the grounds so close to each other, but you've got obviously Notts over the river. You've got those amazing old boat houses. You've got, is it the Meadows, the green area, just the other side? I mean, I've done a half marathon from there. It took me quite a long time. And obviously you've got the City Ground, and the rugby club doesn't seem that far away either. So, you should absolutely celebrate that. And for the fans walking in from the city, going over the bridge, seeing that club, seeing that, that stadium. I mean, look, I'm just an outsider. I have no emotional connection. It's not my club, but even I feel slightly sort of uplifted going over. And so, you've got to appreciate that. You've got to appreciate you're in the Premier League, despite, the three who came up weren't very good, went back down. It's still an achievement to have actually stayed in there.
I mean, by chaotic, I mean, it feels like there's so much going on, but I'm kind of engulfed in it. I do this 6 days a week. Are Forest that different to other clubs? Because you look at Manchester United, they're, just a unique beast. But are Forest as a Premier League, are they unique in the way they're run and the way they do things? Or do we get so caught up in it as fans, do you think, that we have a misconception?
Well, every club's unique, and I mean, I was at Manchester United yesterday, and the roof was effectively caving in. They've still got the Glazers on board, who are probably the most wretched owners a club have had, certainly in the top 5 in recent years. I mean, every club does have issues, whether it's ticket pricing. I was slightly surprised and disappointed that a club which I always felt was very close to its community, very close to its support, almost like a family, had those sort of ticket prices. I just didn't quite. It's a general thing. I don't understand the sort of the hiking of ticket prices, particularly post-COVID, when all clubs said, "Oh my God, how much we miss fans." Jock Stein was right. Football's nothing without fans. And then you go and hike ticket prices, not simply Forest, but to rake in, I don't know what, 5-6 million more a year. I mean, you probably spent twice that on agents' fees this year. You'd know better than I would, probably more, and you've wasted money on some players. Look, some of your recruits have undoubtedly been terrific, and you'll make money on them. But just again, that's that sort of. I take your point about sort of chaos, but it seems to be, if you step back, actually with tweaking, it doesn't actually need too much. I don't think Marinakis is a bad owner. I think he has an ego. I think he wants the club to do well. He wants it to be financially viable. Whether he wants to make money or whether it's just about sort of more about ego for him and the love of sport, I don't know. He seems a fairly wealthy man anyway. But when I did meet him, I had a sort of like, I don't know, about at the most a 5 minutes of chat with him one-on-one. I actually came, and partly because I was pro Cooper and I've been sort of writing pieces, sort of standing up for him. This was before he left. I was actually quite impressed with Marinakis, because there was, you don't achieve what he's done as a businessman without, having a certain, well, absolute intelligence, business sense. But yeah, again, maybe it's just a simple, just stepping slightly back and having a look at it and saying, do we need that chaos around ticket prices? Do we need that chaos, in inverted commas, around stadium uncertainty, when we've got one of the most passionate, respected grounds for neutrals like me to go to, let alone people who are emotionally engaged like you, and walk into the ground and it's just full of memories? I mean, it'd be like leaving a child at home if you did move on. There was a lot right about the club.
Yeah, exactly. When you look at where we are now from when he came in, I mean, he inherited a real mess. He's pumped so much money in, and he's got so much ambition. One of the things we're going to discuss on the podcast later today, with as we record this with Darren Fletcher and a few of the other regulars, is how good or how bad are Forest, because they finished 17th, 16th and 17th. It's going to be, so they've been close to relegation. But you look at the squad; there's a lot of good young talent in there. Are you optimistic that the building blocks are in place for them to establish themselves in the next 3 or 4 years then?
Yeah, as long as you don't kick the building blocks around and stub your toe, because the building blocks are there. You have got some good players, as you say. You'd know far better than I am. But when I watch you, the occasions I go to the ground, obviously watching games on TV and on the highlights as well, doesn't give you completely. You can't see the runs a player might have made away from the camera's eye. So no, there just seems you're in a better place than I think people think. Just because you look at the division, you obviously lost the points, rightly in my eyes, because you talk to other clubs. Just on the points deduction, look, everyone knew that Forest had overspent. There were issues there, but what it has to do, it's a bit like VAR. It has to be applied consistently, and we're still waiting on Manchester City under 15 charges. They deny all that. They will have their day in the committee. But I do think that was fair enough. But in terms of even with the points deduction, the other teams weren't great, but you are still there. You are still in this extraordinary, what is it, 120 million just simply for being on the start line in August. So yeah, I mean, it's again, because I look at it from the outside, I go in there, I just sort of see the positives. You'd always like a few more young players stepping up. You've got one or two. You've got a good manager for your level. That's not being patronising. It's just Nuno is, in a way, because he's quite a unifying individual. I mean, I did a community event with him, and he was just so totally emotionally engaged. It was a homelessness campaign in Wolverhampton. And not only did he go along, let's just give you a little bit of insight about the man. You'll know the manager, but about the man that Nuno is. Not only did he go along and help, and he talked to people and was just emotionally engaged for the sort of 2-3 hours that he was there, but I found out later, and he didn't mention it, that he'd made a substantial donation. I think it's about £250,000. Okay, now managers are wealthy, people in football are wealthy, but that's still quite a chunky sum. So, and I think that element of homelessness, and I put it to him because obviously he was uprooted as a kid. Family moved to, I think they moved to Porto. He was racially abused as a kid. There was that slight element of rootlessness with Nuno, and he's very much so strong with his family. Talked very emotionally about missing his wife. This was at Wolverhampton. So when the character of someone like that, I'm going about this in a slightly roundabout way. My take on Forest is that they're good people there. And just a broader point, and this is why I thought the fallout from that daft tweet was also sad, is that if you talk to most football journalists, certainly sort of my advanced years who've been doing this a long time, Forest fans are genuinely, you can't generalize completely, but Forest fans are generally considered the more measured ones. So if I'm looking for a sort of take on the issues in the game, whether it's the European Super League, whether it's ticket prices, whether it's moving kickoff times, whether it's daft train companies cancelling their trains late at night, I'll go on Forest fans forums. I'll listen to you. I'll talk to Forest fans in the pub. I'll talk to Forest fans who live in Nottinghamshire. And because I know they're going to give me a balanced view, and that is because you've seen greatness with Clough, you've also seen the difficult times, and you're a pretty balanced bunch. Now you may say, actually, we've got some real nutters amongst our fan group, and as someone who's covered England, I've seen one or two of them who really should have banning orders. But yeah, I just think again, take a step back and look what you've got. Is that right about the fans? Am I over romanticizing it? I actually found they're actually quite a good bellwether for what is the state of the nation in terms of the national sport. And I would say the majority of them I talked to actually measured and intelligent. That's why I thought that Tweetgate was sad.
Well, I do agree. I think the thing that the tweet did, it opened a can of worms, certainly around within the club. You hear the Premier League anthem booed mercilessly the last 2 home games, which didn't happen even after the points deduction. And I think the tweet was the catalyst for that. And it also feels like it's spreading now. I don't think Forest were the catalyst for this. This is a wider point, but everything that goes against the club now the cry seems to be corruption. You know, it used to be like this referee biased against my club, this commentator's biased against my club. This is a topic we've discussed a lot on here, and I feel like I'm going against the grain in Forest fans now, but just saying I don't think it is corruption. I think the game's got so many problems.
Stop and listen to what you were saying there. I don't think it is corruption. Come on. These referees, you might say they make mistakes, but they're honest mistakes. I've only seen I've done what? I know 4,000 games I've covered in my life, and only on 2 occasions have I come away thinking something not right about that referee. But these referees we've got, it's a poor generation of referees. I'm absolutely not disputing that, and that's being highlighted by VAR and their often hapless execution of it. But honestly, seriously, listen to yourself. They are not corrupt. I'm not here to sort of give PGMO's argument or make their case. They've got people. Howard Webb should be coming out and doing that. I'm just giving the case for sanity. And a lot of clubs think, oh, this referee's against us. But to accuse someone of corruption is nonsense.
Yeah, and we've said that. I've said, me saying they're not corrupt, and people on our podcast saying they're not corrupt gets us a lot of stick in the comments, which is a bit of a state of society.
Honestly, Forest fans have got to look at themselves, and I have huge respect for Forest fans for all the reasons that I've outlined. That actually, and I find it strange because they are the more measured. I could point you to sort of slightly more mercurial fans group who are sort of far more up and down. Forest fans, are terrific, but on this, they are wrong. They're not corrupt, and actually, it undermines their argument when you're starting to throw things like that around. Because fans of other clubs go, come on.
Do you think the Premier League's in a bit of a tipping point around how VAR is perceived and PSR? Because Leicester might start on minus points, Everton might be getting minus points. Ipswich are going to come up with a very little budget to compete. Does it feel like the Premier League needs to redress the balance a little bit of how everything is? Because fans feel like they're wavering their faith a little bit to me at the moment.
2 separate issues. On VAR, I agree with you. There's so much work that needs to be done there. And the important thing is that to recognise who the game belongs to. The game belongs to you, the supporters. The game belongs to the players. It doesn't belong to me and the media, and it certainly doesn't belong to schoolmaster types in Stockley Park with their pens and their rulers working out offside. So from that, there must be more transparency. There must be more communication in grounds. Everyone sort of says, "Oh, it works so well in technology. Works so well in like sort of American sports." Obviously, they're sports which have natural delays, so you can go into it there. But they work there because of the communication inside the ground. I find it absolutely ridiculous that. Actually, a broader point is that fans in this country aren't militant enough because it's so tribal. If you went down slightly more the sort of German model and you actually united club to club, you would have a much stronger voice to the Football Sports Association do fantastic work. But collectively, I think if the fans got together and said to PGMO and said to the Premier League and said to the FA, we are hating being treated as second-class citizens on a range of issues, but specifically on VAR, it's very simple. 2 fingers to IFAB. We want proper communication inside the ground, and I think that would help the referees. I think people will understand the communication. I think they would. I think those recidivists who think there's corruption would think again. So absolutely on VAR that needs to be done. But look, VAR is here to stay. We can have, I was in Paris in 2009, saw Thierry Henry's handball to William Gallas, and the Irish were effectively robbed of the possibility of going to the World Cup. It is here to stay. It's it's Pandora's box. You're not going to sort of nail it back down again. Now, occasionally, like going and watching EFL clubs. I mean, Leicester's not that far away, and that's quite fun because there's no VAR, and I understand that. But look, it's here to stay. It's about improving the execution of it. Semi-automated when it comes in next season will absolutely help on offside, and you have to improve the standard of refereeing. But again, take a step back and think: if you've got normally measured fans like Nottingham Forest, absolutely ripping into referees and accusing them of corruption. Are you going to be a young referee starting out and thinking, do I really want to go into this absolute maelstrom? So, we all have to sort of show referees a little bit more respect. And look, it's so frustrating. I get frustrating, and I'm not sort of, I don't have a sort of dog in the fight, but absolutely. So VAR is here to stay. Standards need improving. They're not corrupt. On PSR, it is it's consistency, it's transparency. It should be done far quicker. You know, at the moment, we've got a sport being run by schoolmasters at Stockley Park and lawyers. And that is wrong. The game should be defined by Nuno, by Gibbs White, by you, Matt, by fans. So that is where I agree. The sort of balance needs tipping back on that. PSR, the essence of PSR, FFP is balancing books, which is that kind of makes sense. We don't want to put clubs at risk. I do think there is an argument for a new owner to have a little bit more license to invest money initially. I mean, I was up at Glasgow for the Old Firm game, and I came back on the train, which came back via Newcastle, and the Newcastle United fans on the train, and they were sort of scratching their head over PSR and said, "Listen, we've got some of the wealth." Leaving aside the moral element of the owners of Newcastle United, we've got the money. Why can't we invest in it? Even more, and there's a legitimate case for a new venture having a slightly sort of different rules. But I think the essence of FFP makes sense, because clubs are, we saw it even more in COVID, they are the heartbeat of the community, and they have to be protected, and we don't want overspending, but it needs to be done quicker. So I understand the frustration on that. But if there was one thing, the cynical in me, say if this had been sort of Manchester United on the previous regime and a tweet like that had come out, everyone would have written siege mentality, circle the wagons. It's all about providing that last dance type sort of aggravation, internal aggravation, to drive you on towards, the rest of the world's against us, to drive you on towards the finishing line and make you stay up. But I just think it was an emotional outburst, and they're never particularly wise, particularly not from the boardroom.
Just before we talk about what you're up to these days, one last question I wanted to come back to. Just on Nuno, there's a lot of doubt in the fan base that he's the man to take us forward. They question his in-game management and substitutions, like every fan does at every club. Are you surprised by that? You feel, from what you've said, it sounds like you're a big advocate of him.
I just think for who you are, I mean, you're not going to get Ancelotti. I know Klopp might technically be available, but with respect to the beautiful scenery you've got around you, and you've got one of the best restaurants I've ever been to about 3 miles out of town, you've got, I don't think, with respect, he's not going to come to the City ground. I think what I like about Nuno is that he cares, and I think a lot of people in football don't care. Nuno cares. I know it's because he slightly wants to rehabilitate his reputation post Spurs, but I just think that the people of Nottingham Forest, staff, fans, players, they chime with him, and he is a very caring individual as a man, as a manager. You talk to players who played for him, and they agree on some of those things, the sort of in-game management, timing of substitution, and things like that. But I just think I actually think, barring one or two sort of comments about referees, I actually think he's handled himself with a little bit of dignity. And I quite like that. We don't understand the pressure that managers are placed under health-wise. The fact that they are the lightning rod for everything that goes wrong in their club, because they are the main spokesman. They have to deal with owners. They have to deal with agents, players, families. They have to deal with increased media amongst supporters, which is absolutely brilliant, but it does occupy them, and still have time for their family and still be a caring individual. And I think Nuno balances that well. So on a very human level, I'm glad that he's kept Forest up, because it would have damaged his reputation if he'd gone down. I mean, he wouldn't have survived. You'd know better than I would. But with respect, who are you going to get that's better?
Yeah, well, fans are saying Glasner was in the frame, but there's a whole debate around. He's got Eze, Elise, Mateta, players that are firing. That's a.
He's also London. It's also London.
Big ball.
Big factor with coaches.
I'm very glad you say he cares as well, because fans see the demeanour on the touchline and the very muted interviews compared to Cooper, who was quite a charismatic showman as well. I think fans have probably a misconception of who Nuno is. So I'm glad you've said that as well. Certainly.
Yeah, he was. I think I can tell the story. He when he goes on holiday, this is what I like about him. He's quite quirky. When he goes on holiday, he never showers. because if it's a beach holiday, obviously he grew up on an island in the Atlantic, and that was the sort of the beach life, and he would have sand between his toes, and sort of he's so it sounds like a sort of bounty ad this, but he was sort of cloaked in salt from going in and out of the sea. And he says, and I just like that about him, because he's just very human. He has the sort of the echoes of his childhood remain with him, feeling that, even when he's got a suit on, he can still feel that little boy who sort of grew up with the, this sounds weird, just with the sort of, the salt. I mean, his wife sort of just sort of gets irritated, saying, have a shower before you come to bed. I don't want salt and sand. I have to say, this is not a sort of detail you would have got from Sir Alex Ferguson or Pep Guardiola. But again, that comes back to the humanity of the man. And maybe I'm a softie, and I quite like managers to be good human beings, and Nuno is.
Yeah, certainly. Wonderful insight. Just before we get on to what Henry's doing these days, a quick advert for our sponsor, the Trent Navigation. Get your tickets now for Forza Fest on Saturday, June 8th, £15 from gigantic.com, or you can scan the QR code on the screen now if you're watching on YouTube. Right, Henry, I've referenced a couple of times what you're up to these days. You sort of, like myself.
I'm more worried about making sure that I get to see Forest in the Premier League, which I will do next season, because I think it's one of the good experiences, just parking up, walking in, crossing the road, just seeing all those sort of little developments, how things have sort of improved over the years. The restaurant's got another bouncer outside, and it looks good inside. And then sort of walking out around, I always walk out to over to the bridge. I think there used to be a bookshop there, a very good football bookshop. I don't know whether that's still there anymore, but there's a news agent on there, which always has a picture of Clough in the window. And I have because my start of my career sort of slightly overlapped with the great man. So all of that, it's when you go to Nottingham Forest, and when you park up, when you go to the City Ground, that you're embedded in football.
I'll give you another chance. I feel like as a businessman, you should. Where can people find you these days?
Well, I'm all over social media. My answer phone says yes. What time? I'm a bit of a tart. I always have been. I mean, I had 2 books planned, which I was going to start writing after the Euros, and then I left the Times, or they left me. And so I was sort of working on those 2 football books. Do a lot on Substack. So it's multi-platform like you guys.
Excellent. That's an interesting way the media's moving. I'd love to have another discussion about that another time, but Henry's got to go. But it's really good to get your insight, Henry. As ever, if people have enjoyed this, do us a favor, hit like, hit subscribe, do consider becoming a channel member, and leave us a lovely review on iTunes. Right, Henry, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate that.
Can I just say one final thing? And
yes, please.
Completely as an outsider, don't leave the City Ground.
Agreed.
Just 2 things. I read Danny's piece, and Danny is impeccably sourced on all clubs, but particularly on Forest. It seems to me that, again, I'm an outsider, but stay there because of the special atmosphere. Stay there because of the history and the memories. Stay there because really freehold. What's freehold, Danny saying? 10 million quid?
10 million, up to 10 million.
Seriously, just snap their hands off. I can't believe the council are completely against you. That just that seems a strange fight to pick. You should be absolutely working together, and then just rebuild the 2 sites either side of the pitch. Was it the Brian Clough and the Peter Taylor, particularly the Peter Taylor? So I mean, I got banned once by Forest, not really their fault. It was a sort of league-wide thing, and I thought, well, sod that. So I went and sat in the Brian Clough upper, and I obviously got quite right a lot of stick. What was I doing there with my laptop out, tapping away? So I got a sort of feel of the fans around there, and that is the stand probably needs a bit of work, but I mean, you could build. I mean, there's car parks, I think, either side. If my geography is right, I think you could build back, even if you sort of cantilever there, and you would increase it. I don't know whether Marinakis wants a new stadium for reasons of ego, for PSR, but it would change the atmosphere. You've got a very special atmosphere, and you know that better than anyone. So just play with that huge strength of your club. Just be careful.
Yeah, I mean Saturday was as loud as I've heard it. It was incredible, deafening, and I'd be so sad to lose that, as so many fans would, as Henry says. Right, we shall leave it there. We'll be back tomorrow, looking ahead to the Burnley game, the final game of the season, where hopefully we can all relax. That's the plan, anyway. Right, thanks very much for your time, everyone. Have a good day, and we shall see you soon.